Well, I've been for the last 35 years studying American history, trying to understand how we tick. And I think in institutions like the Civil War, baseball, jazz, where you can learn a lot about who we are, where in the national parks reveals an amazing sense of who Americans are. The idea that for the first time in history, we set aside these lands. Nobody had ever done that. All other land was set aside for kings and noblemen, but in America it was set aside for everybody for all times. I think people forget, particularly in California where there's so many spectacular parks, that everybody is within a few hours of coming to some of the most magnificent areas in this world.
I didn't know anyone who talked about national parks. It was a language that was not spoken in my neighborhood, if one could describe national parks as a language. It was something that was not spoken. But, you know, growing up, watching television, listening to the radio, you'd hear from afar these stories about wild places. You'd hear these stories or see these stories about national parks. And the beauty that came through those screens and it came through the television or through the radio was such that it created this hunger in me to see those places and to experience those places. So I think it was just a matter of time before I found myself at the doorstep of to Yellowstone National Park and working here in Yosemite.
Juan Lujan had grown up in West Texas.
There are too many communities that don't yet feel an ownership of the national parks, often African American, Hispanic American communities that don't come here in the same number as other populations. And the heroes of the national park come from every corner and from every type of person. And so I'm going into inner cities and showing Hispanic American school kids that George Melendez-Wright was the first biologist of the National Park Service who really helped rearrange the molecules of the Park Service with how it dealt with wildlife, that the first guardians of Yosemite were African American buffalo soldiers.
Well, the buffalo soldier history here in Yosemite and Sequoia National Park was essentially forgotten, even though they were among the first park rangers and helped protect Yosemite and Sequoia in 1899, 1903, and 1904. And so if your job is to bring that story to life and to resurrect it from the past that it's fallen into, you got to figure out the right kind of platform to do that. So having this history now become part of a film, a major film, which I think will be the definitive film of the national parks, is more than just a life rope being tossed to these dead soldiers who were here 100 years ago. It's a way of bringing back the dead to some degree. And I make it part of my job to speak for those soldiers because I recognize the importance that they have to Yosemite and to the rest of the country as well. I have a problem with the whole idea of just referring to these places as parks, because most people that live in urban areas, when they think of a park, they think of a city park or a county park. But Wrangell St. Elias, the largest national park in the United States, park is not a strong enough word to describe the scope of it and the power of it. When you have a place where grizzly bears roam free, park's not a good word to describe it, and grizzly bears roam free in Yellowstone. They roam free, North Cascades. They roam free in many of the parks up in Alaska. And when you're in the presence of a grizzly bear, and I've been in that presence, I've surprised a sow grizzly with cubs. And when you're in the presence of that bear and there's nothing between you and that bear but air, you're very aware of your own frailty, your own mortality. And when that bear decides to let you live, you realize that there is redemption in this world, and the fact that you can get close to something as powerful as that animal, and it can decide, and it makes the choice. Now that's the value of wilderness, is that we are not in control, we are under the control of the greater world around us. And when a bear is locking you and looking in your eyes, and you're looking in its eyes, you are aware that we are just a part of something much bigger, and we don't have the control that we think we have. And that is so healthy for modern human beings to be in situations where they recognize their own humanity and the limits to what they can do. Visiting a national park and experiencing that can be a life-changing experience, and everyone deserves the right to have that life-changing, that positive experience of being connected to the earth again.
This park was created and is now administered for the benefit and enjoyment of the people.
This is a history of the ideas and the individuals that made this uniquely American idea possible, and it's filled with people that are brown, black, white, red, yellow.
Whether they're rich or they're poor, whatever race they are, ethnicity, the national parks belong to them. These magnificent, spectacular places belong to them. It doesn't matter when their ancestors arrived here, whether they came over on the Mayflower or just entered the country.
You pinch yourself, you're out at you know, 4 a.m. and the sun is coming up in the middle of the summer, and you get the first light on a rock and get some spectacular footage, and you just can't believe you're being paid. I think I've got the best job in the country.